Good evening and thank you for joining me. This is Eric J. Sorry for my voice, I'm getting over a cold, so please bear with me on that. Um, After the State of the Union, I was discussing several things with some friends, and one thing that was brought out to me is a little, well, strange, was the idea of it being a moral issue to keep wages artificially high and to protect jobs. Now, I'm going to get into why that became strange to me, primarily for, well, the two reasons they were discussing, which I'll unpack. Okay, this is all from like an economics perspective. With wages being forced unnecessarily high. Now, what do I mean by forced? It means that if through government policies that to allow workers to come into this nation in order to be able to contribute to our economy, workers that might actually be willing to work for less money. What you're doing is that you're forcing employers to only choose workers from a very select pool of workers. But all that does is just keep wages as a whole, as a total general economy, forcibly high. Now, high wages are good for individual families, but as far as the total economy, you're essentially forcing all prices to remain high. Now, where's the correlation there? The correlation is this. Whenever you are forcing wages to remain high, you're forcing prices of goods and services to remain high in order to pay for those wages. Part of that is that due to you not allowing for an influx of workers to come in, potentially at a lower wage, you're also allowing for increased scarcity of commodities and services, which would benefit the regular everyday family by allowing for increased supply to meet the demand or even to surpass demand. Higher supply to surpass demand means that producers would be able to lower prices just to accommodate that increased supply because they'd be able to derive equal to or greater profits by selling more of a certain commodity. Now, commodity prices are not universally set, they're determined by market demand. If you have a very small amount of commodity or services but high demand, prices will always raise up, which is good for the producer because they could generate more profit, but it signals the producers to generate more of that commodity and service. The reason why is because they want to take advantage of those high prices for higher profit. Of course, if they ramp up the production of these services and commodities, ultimately speaking, all those prices will even out to demand. So you're talking about lowering prices to meet a steady demand, and obviously demand itself will generally increase by having all these additional workers flood into the market. That is discussing the forced higher wages. You don't want to have forced higher wages with this. You want the market to be able to determine that based on the amount of workers that are available and the amount of work you have available to accommodate those workers. But by keeping them artificially high, each individual family wants to be able to have high wages right now, but that's a whole discussion into itself because the question is, do you want large quantities of cash to be able to afford prices that currently are, or do you want to have smaller amounts of cash that can purchase more? Best example is, do you want to be able to go to the store with $200 to be able to buy a full cart of groceries, or be able to buy that same cart of groceries for 50, 40, 30, or even $20? Continuously increasing supply, prices themselves will lower so that those increased commodities will be purchased by all of those consumers out there. So obviously by having forced higher wages, you're focusing much more on quantity of cash, not the purchasing power of that money. So it's a little screwy as to how people are looking at that. Now, then there's the job protection side of things, which is actually a socialistic perspective. Now, I'm going to get into that. First of all, why do jobs need to be protected? Whenever you look at this job protection, we ourselves as the individual worker are charged with protecting our own job. Now, how do we do that? We do that by proving to our employer on how much of an asset we can be to them. We are selling ourselves, our services to that employer, saying, keep with me, I will provide you with high quality work, incredible production, either equal to or even staying longer hours to be able to contribute even more to the success of that business. Not becoming a liability, saying, I want you to protect my job regardless of how well I work. Because if somebody's coming in who is potentially willing to work better, harder, and longer for that employer, you're becoming a liability to that employer. So, but ultimately, this should be a reinforcement of points where you decide for yourself, with all of these additional workers that come into the market, I want to be able to prove to my boss that I am a greater asset than anybody else coming in. Now, that might ultimately be that's where you take a higher paying position, meaning a supervisory position, so that your employer can ensure that, since you already know the standard of his work, of his employment, that you can raise all of these lower earning workers up to that level of standard. When you're allowing all these additional workers in, possibly through even greater immigration, you're possibly getting, like I said, great workers who can raise the continual standard of the product, making it so that your business is more competitive in the market. They're working for less pay so that your employer can hire on more of them, be more profitable, and possibly even raising, since it's more greater profit level, a general level of profit within your company in itself, which does not have to reflect the entire industry. Your own company would be able to benefit without as much of a detriment on the prices of the goods and services, and also if they're willing to work for longer hours. Now, like I said, those working for longer hours, reinforcing it contributes to lower prices by the greater production, as well as, like I said, cheaper for the employer, and it makes it cheaper for the customer. So ultimately speaking, allowing for greatly increased immigration is not a detriment to our economy. It's a massive boon, and it just helps us as workers to be better than what we currently are, raise our own higher standard to show our boss on how much better we can be, instead of worrying about on how somebody else is going to come in and take our jobs. The immigration discussion will actually be continued in a different video, but at least wanted to convey that opinion to you. I look forward to having additional discussions with you.
Also, should it pique your interest, for the enterprising mind, below is a link to the Tom Woods Liberty Classroom, where you can really expand your knowledge of free market economics, which is the same school of thought that great thinkers such as Milton Friedman as well as Murray Rothbard really championed. So go ahead and take a look at it through that link, as well as for those fans of Ron Paul, go ahead and check out his homeschool curriculum also below in the description box. Thank you for joining us this evening with our discussion. Please do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the additional uploads that I make. Please remember to share with your friends and family so they can also join in and contribute to the discussion about our government and our founding documents. Also, do yourself a favor and check out the other videos on my channel so we can continue the discussion even with them. God bless and good evening.